Hi there, my name is Adele and I'm a certified clinical trauma therapist and I work with Naked.Recovery, and in my company we focus on helping people get over all kinds of traumas in life. Now, one of the traumas we're really supporting people with at the moment are all the lockdowns, and there is a massive impact globally on people with all the lockdowns and the tears and the pandemic and the crisis and everything that had happened in 2020. So if you find yourself having struggled with all the different events that have happened in 2020, or you find yourself struggling with your country being in lockdown and the endless Groundhog Day of this, you're not alone. I think a lot of people can relate to that. And what we're actually finding when we actually assess people and work with them are early stage signs of PTSD. That's right. People are actually showing signs of post-traumatic stress disorder. So I want to make a series of videos to actually support people that are going through the various lockdowns and kind of explain to you what a trauma response looks like, why the pandemic is being perceived and experienced as a trauma for so many people, and all the different things that you can do about it, from how it's impacting your parenting, your relationships, your families, and your day-to-day kind of steps that you can take to kind of get yourself in check. So first things first, I'm going to kick off the series by talking about trauma. Now, when we define trauma, we see it as something that's really dramatic and hectic that has happened in one kind of go. Like you've been in a massive car accident, or you had to go to the ICU, or you were tortured whilst you were going away at war, you were attacked. So trauma can be a really harrowing event that you have experienced, where you've actually experienced it directly or vicariously by seeing or witnessing something really horrific. Trauma can also be the collection of lots and lots of very stressful events that are kind of culminated into one kind of go. And it's kind of working out which one of those events becomes the straw that breaks the camel's back. What we're seeing with the pandemic, it's more in the secondary case. Lots and lots of events, lots and lots of uncertainty that has come our way. And eventually one event has just been the straw that breaks the camel's back, and we find ourselves no longer able to cope. How do you know you're having a trauma response? So I want to give you some symptoms of PTSD, and this is from various trauma services across the United Kingdom, the United States. But I think most trauma specialists will agree that when people start to display some of these symptoms, they're actually showing early signs of PTSD. Upsetting memories coming to mind when you don't want them to. Nightmares of the event or dreams with a very threatening theme. Dissociative reactions such as flashbacks, where you might lose touch with your surroundings for longer periods. Feeling physically or emotionally upset when you're reminded of events. Constantly looking out for danger, or being very easily startled, problems sleeping, problems concentrating, problems with memory, feeling angry, feeling frightened, staying away from people, staying away from events, trying not to think or talk about anything that has happened, feeling disconnected or numb, like you have no feelings, not washing, not getting out of bed, not making an effort with anything, feeling everything is pointless, everything is the same. Negative thoughts about yourself or the world, strong sense of blame towards yourself or others, feeling depressed, withdrawn, irritable, less interested in things, feeling alienated, guilty, full of self-blame, shame, or self-criticism. It's a pretty hefty list, but if you find yourself identifying with 10 or more of those, you are already displaying signs of PTSD and you should really get support. Now, I want to explain why people get PTSD. Now we've looked at obviously the nature of the event is a culmination of lots of stressful things that have happened. But also, if you are finding yourself no longer able to cope, please don't blame yourself. A trauma response is a very natural thing that we have been kind of engineered to do as human beings for centuries. Our brain actually controls that whole mechanism. So you really shouldn't blame yourself. It's actually something happening automatically within your brain. It's a conversation that is occurring or not occurring between your amygdala, sensory cortex, and your hippocampus. So I'm going to explain the mechanism because it is useful to kind of understand what that is all about. So in the brain, we have an alarm system, and that alarm system is there as our brain has evolved to kind of keep ourselves as human beings safe. the alarm system goes off if it ever notifies any kind of threats in the area. So for example, you're walking around in a forest, you suddenly see something move quite quickly on the ground, you get that startle response. That startle response and that moment of shock is the amygdala actually notifying you that there's a problem. What then happens is the hippocampus, which is the very calm and professorial part of the brain, looks over through the sensory cortex, through the whole filing system. Oh yes, not to worry, that was a bird. Calm down, amygdala, get back in your box, everything is okay. So the amygdala, which is kind of this panicky secretary, goes back to its box and all is well. The problem is with the pandemic, almost daily, weekly, we're watching the news, we're checking out social media, we're listening to politicians like rattle on about stuff. We hear that the neighbor has contracted COVID. Our country has moved into the next year of lockdown. Christmas is cancelled. This thing is cancelled. Now we must homeschool. The list is endless. The amygdala has had so many things to completely freak out about that it is just not able to calm down anymore. Now, when that starts to happen, it's actually very difficult for the hippocampus to put the amygdala back in its box and to keep the amygdala back in its box. Basically, the hysterical secretary starts to run the show within your brain. Why is that? Because the way that the amygdala works is when it is mobilizing the human being to get to safety, it does so by releasing adrenaline. It releases other things as well, but adrenaline is the main thing it needs to release to enable us to fight, flee, or freeze. And in olden times, that's how we got to safety. In today's times, when we have too much adrenaline running around our body and we do not complete the stress cycle by getting rid of all that adrenaline, the adrenaline starts to really reap havoc within our system. We start to become adrenally fatigued and the stress hormone cortisol starts to run the show. When that happens, the cortisol actually shuts down the proper functioning of the hippocampus. The hippocampus is no longer to operate in its normal capacity. And that's kind of makes sense because in prehistoric times, we didn't need the hippocampus to go, let me look through the sensory cortex. We just needed to run away from the lion that was chasing us. So it makes sense that the hippocampus needs to go offline, but that mechanism now remains today where we need the hippocampus to tell us it's an irrational fear and we have nothing to panic about, but we don't know how to do that because the hippocampus is not able to actually give us that information. That way, the amygdala runs the show and it runs to the hippocampus doesn't give it an answer, runs back again, runs back to the hippocampus doesn't provide an answer, runs back again. This is called anxiety. This is why people are suffering from anxiety and you start to get depressed and morose. It's because it just feels like there's no end to this and you're on this constant tape loop. So I'm going to produce a series of videos. I'm going to be explaining all the different things that you can do to gain control of yourself during this pandemic, during these crises that happen, how you become more resilient during all these things that are occurring, how you can work better with your relationships, signpost, issues that you might be experiencing, how you can spot these things with other people and what to do and how to deal with other people who might not be coping. The boxes, the human needs, why as human beings we have to have things in certain boxes or our lives don't make sense in a particular way. I'm going to explain all these things to you and give you some tips and things that you can do. The first thing I will tell you is you need the trauma diet. So the trauma diet is something that we produce within our company, but in case of emergency, which I really think this pandemic is, I've just decided anyone who emails us or wants to know anything about the trauma diet, we will just give them the trauma diet with my compliments. So just click on the link at the end of this video, get yourself the trauma diet and start living a better, healthier life to enable yourself to not have all your hormones and things running around in crisis. Now, I can already tell you that some of the key principles of the trauma diet, you're not going to like them because what they're involved in is eating healthier. You've got to treat yourself a bit more like an athlete during these times. And what I'm seeing a lot of people do during the pandemic is they're burying their nose in Ben and Jerry's ice cream, they're drinking lots and lots of wine, they're running around addicted to coffee. This is havoc when it comes to the whole endocrine system, controlling the amygdala, sorting out the adrenaline, calming down the calming down all of the cortisol and getting oxytocin released. None of that is going to happen if you continue the diet that you have. So if you're interested in feeling better and getting control of your anxiety, make sure that you get the trauma diet. Following that, subscribe, make sure that you get access to any of the more videos that I'm going to be producing. I'm going to cover quite a few of things that you can actually do to gain control. So this video might pertain to you, or share it with somebody else that is struggling. But if you are struggling with this pandemic, you're not alone. A lot of people are going through crisis, and there are a lot of us that are here to support you. So if you have any questions, or there are things that you want me to answer or talk about during this series, just ping me a message. But till then, take care.